What was your fuck this shit timeout moment? When I was 18 I answered a very convincing job posting to find out it was an 8 hours interview for Cutco knives. I got up about 30 minutes in and started for the door and was intercepted by one of the leaders to try and get me to stay. I said I had to grab something from my car, then dipped to Wendy's. Man, that was a good burger. A new girl in my team was struggling to do her job. She kept messing up, making mistakes and needing help. I kept picking up the pieces and fixing the mistakes so that we don't have any issues. A series of system faults caused problems on my end. I was put on probation and monitored for the next 2 weeks, and in the hearings, I was constantly compared to the new girl who was off to a blinding start. I asked for a 2-week emergency leave, and the minute it was granted, I promptly handed in my 2-week notice and resigned. Out like a gunshot. I was working selling timeshares to Branson, Mo. I sucked at it. The computer auto-dialed like 200 numbers a night. After 4 miserable days of no success, and no commission, I found myself 20 minutes into a conversation with a very elderly, line woman. She was about to take the bait and buy this waste of a timeshare with a small portion of her fixed income. Right before I was about to get my closer, I just hung up and left. I couldn't do it. Nobody from the call center called to follow up. I wasn't remotely missed. I live 2 hours from Branson. That place is crawling with timeshare salesmen. They're even in the Bass Pro at the Landing. It's annoying. Growing up, we always spent a week in the summer at a hotel in Branson. One summer, we couldn't get our hotel booked for the whole week, so we were going to spend 3 nights at it and figure out another hotel for our last 3 nights. My mom happened upon a timeshare seminar where they were giving out 3-night stays at one of the expensive hotels to anyone who stayed for the whole seminar. My mom stayed, got a voucher for the nights, and immediately walked out. Second hotel secured. Took a job at a dollar store helping to keep up over the Christmas rush and was only supposed to be temporary until the holidays were over. Ended up staying on longer and put on the evening shift. Was given a job to break down pallets that came in during the day and sort all the boxes to where they were supposed to go. The night shift manager kept pulling me out of the back to help on the floor, so the pallets weren't getting broken down. About a week later, my fiancée gets a call from the manager and he tells her I'm fired and not to bother coming in. Didn't even ask to talk to me. I went to the store to confront him and he told me I was fired because I was slacking off and not doing my assigned tasks. I asked him if he even talked to the night shift manager to ask what I had been doing, to which he replied no. I informed him the tasks hadn't been getting done because I kept getting pulled to the floor. Guy offered me my job back on probation, to which I told him to shove it and walked out. Worked for a guy who must have been close personal friends with Satan. I was not allowed to sit down or drink water no matter what task I was doing. Always being yelled at for doing X instead of Y. But when I did Y I was yelled at for not doing X. Worked 13-hour days, etc. 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 Last straw was the day I was the first person in at 6 a.m. Was forced to work with a client who repeatedly made things sexual with me that I had asked not to work with. Then I was given the last lunch at 2 p.m. But before I went to lunch I was yelled at again for not having the same knowledge base as my PhD boss. None of this was new, but I just snapped, went to lunch and never went back. Nothing special. I worked in a craft store that also does picture framing, specifically in the picture framing department, for close to 10 bloody years. My last year there went from full-time hours, to part-time hours, to well, I don't really have framing hours available, but I can schedule you to work the truck, which meant 4 a.m. heavy labor shifts, and even when I was scheduled to do work in the framing department they had me doing shitstock work elsewhere in the store. I just woke up one morning at fucking 3 a.m. and went nope, called in sick and applied for a slew of jobs, and now I work full-time, salaried, with good benefits, and the work culture isn't shit. Left for a last-minute camping trip after dark, deep in the woods camping on a river. No other places to camp that were closer than half a mile. We comp the area frequently and know it well. We were just going to sleep in the back of the SUV for the first night. Went to bed around 11 p.m. I heard whispering and pushed my friend, who immediately said, "Did you hear whispering too?" "Oh shit." Yes. He reaches up and turns on the headlights, grabs a flashlight, gets out, looks around. Nothing. Turn everything off. Lay down. Hear it again. He honks the horn, looks around. Nothing. No noise. No footprints that weren't ours. Obviously we were both freaked by then and sat up watching. Heard it again and said, "We're out of here." Still get goosebumps thinking about it. We both know sounds travel on water. This was different from anything either of us have experienced. Told this to a friend who is Native American and she said it was stick match men. Update: Native friend said they are stick Indians and you are supposed to throw stick matches so they leave you alone. You are not supposed to whistle at night or follow them, as they will drag you further into the forest. There is a lot more to it, but that is the basic idea. It definitely does not make us feel better about what we heard. I worked at a second-run movie theater when I was 17. We rotated duties often, so one night, you'd run box office, the next night, concessions, door, and so on. It was a mostly okay job until a new manager came on and started cutting corners as much as possible. Our break area was turned into storage. If you wanted a break, you had to go stand around behind the theater. You weren't even allowed to eat your dinner in your car. One bright sunny Sunday, a loud rude phone call summoned us all into work before 10 o'clock. We were given a tour of the dirty theater from the night before. Janitorial staff cleaned our theaters every night. We were only responsible for the trash, concessions vacuuming, and cleaning the popcorn and hot dog cookers. The asshole fired the janitors. He expected us to stay even later after close to clean out the theaters. On top of that, concessions was now in charge of cleaning the bathrooms every 3 hours. Is that really the thing you want your customers associating with concessions? I just got done plunging and mopping after 2 clogged toilets. But there's no harm in me running your popcorn tub through the popped corn with my bare hands. After this announcement was made, I asked if he was hiring new janitors. He said, "Nope." I and several other people either verbally quit after the meeting, or called and quit later. When I was 14 I worked in a grocery store stocking shelves, bagging groceries, and cleaning. I worked there for the whole summer and it was just a pretty normal dehumanizing, awful minimum wage job that I hated. Rude costumers and other employees that liked to yell at me. Anyway, one day at the end of the summer they called me to the bathrooms on the intercom. I show up to the bathroom to find that someone literally took a shit on the wall. Like I don't even understand how this was physically possible, but there was straight up shit on the wall. That was the last straw for me, so I went to the boss's office and told him I quit and got the hell out of there. I was literally like, fuck this shit, I'm out. I worked in fast food for a summer when I was 19, trying to save up for more college textbooks and all that jazz. I hated it there because people were generally pretty crappy to us, especially my much older than me coworkers at the time. Anyways, I was on edge about quitting for a while, but finally said, "Oh screw this place, I'm gone," when one day a bald and smelly older man ordered $100 worth of food from our drive-thru window, just to storm back into the lobby and yell at us while throwing the food back at us, one item at a time. He didn't even open any of it before he was demanding a full refund and chucking sandwiches at our faces. It was me and one other person on the front registers that shift, and when we obviously demanded he stopped, he let out one more scream at us before dumping what was left on the floor, taking his money, and storming out. I quit 2 days later. This was back in 2014. Please don't treat service workers like that, even if it's just a fast food joint. Worked at a factory during summer break in college. Manual labor, greasing machines, changing furnace filters, driving around town picking up parts from machine shops, etc. I actually loved it and had a great time hanging out with the electricians and welders. Then one day the parts guy pulled me into his room and told me to sort and clean up a huge mess of tiny parts, washers, nuts, bolts, and other assorted tiny metal parts. I lasted about a day before I started going crazy. It was so infuriating trying to tell the minute differences between two screws or bushings, and there were thousands of them. The summer was just about over anyway, so I just quit and enjoyed a week off before school started. Was having intimacy and trust issues with a partner, which he made no real effort to work on, and the lack of reciprocal affection was draining me dry. Finally one night he said he just didn't feel like kissing me goodnight. I looked at his pepper plants, thought about how much care and time he put into them, looking for every little sign of nutrient deficiency or stress, balancing their light and their water, taking photos and endlessly ordering supplies to support them. And I realized he cared more about the plants than about me or our relationship, so I gathered my stuff and left. I was on the phone with a very angry client, biggest Karen in the world. She wasn't even mad at me, she was furious about something my boss had done and I was asked to deal with it. Within the first 5 seconds of the call I was told by a colleague to hang up. But I didn't. I tried to explain the problem to the lady and offer a solution, but she wouldn't listen. I let her yell at me for about 20 minutes and once she had nothing else to say, I said, "Okay, this conversation has come to an end. I hope you have a good afternoon," and hung up the phone. I know it's such a silly story to tell, but I felt quite badass. After that I feel like I can have a conversation with anyone on the phone. Mind, I'm an introvert and that says a lot. Haha. Years ago, during my post-teenage years, I worked at a kitchen job that changed managers and became the most miserable environment. The guy running everything was such a dick. He surprised me with the double shift earlier that week. I thought I scheduled someone but I didn't. So take a 15 and come right back. No thank you for helping him out or anything. Plus they moved me from line cook, which they hired me for, to dishwasher. Our relationship reminded me of J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller in Whiplash, just a weird and cruel boss fucking with people. Only instead of jazz it was greasy shitty food. One day I went into work, walked into the dining room, and heard him all the way in the kitchen yelling his stupid asshole head off about something that I'm sure didn't at all matter. What happened next was actually a really good defining moment in retrospect. Without thinking, and completely on instinct, I turned around and walked right back out. Fuck this shit, I'm outta here. Never went back. It felt awesome. Looking back I'm proud of myself for knowing my limits and demonstrating self-respect by not staying in a place I absolutely hated. I went back to my old job and didn't miss a beat. When I worked for the Postal Service, we had a collective meeting with management due to low staff morale and high sick leave because of mismanagement and refusal to listen to the reasons behind it. We were told that if you didn't like it, there's the door. Previously we had also discovered that nationally management were getting productivity bonuses based on worker output, and workers injured on the job were obliged to attend company-affiliated doctors who were also getting bonuses to send workers back to work, regardless of if they were fit to return yet or not. Do you think the workers got any bonuses? I don't need to answer that, you know the answer already. It was coming up to a busy period, so I planned my exit, waited until the start of the busy period, gave management immediate notice and left. A swipes, 5 years later and in a much better place. Truck driver here. TLDR, I finally said I'm done after my boss refused to pay me around $5,000 that I was owed. The long version, after much putting it off and trying to decide the best route, I finally ditched my coke, prostitute-addicted boss and his company in favor of a different place after he refused to pay me for work I already completed. This was after he brought coke into the U.S. and even tried to bring it on my truck. Then as I'm in the process of leaving when I was on the way to take his trailer back to him, he tried to have me arrested for stealing the trailer I was in the middle of bringing back and tried to say I refused the drug test. After I got past that and dropped his trailer off, he tried saying I purposely damaged his trailer to sabotage him. I didn't, and he contacted my new company's boss to try to keep me from getting hired. It was a suppressed version of that moment. In 2010, I was taking the instructor development training course at a place called Frontsite, the largest civilian firearms training center in the U.S., I assume in the world. Several times per day of this 4-day class, they'd cut about 10% of the class, because it was both the training and a 4-day job interview to become one of their instructors. It was day 3, so the class was significantly thinned out. They sat us down for a talk about the culture of working there. It was at this point that the lead instructor decided to brag about how funny it was that they had once had a female instructor, the only one in the school. She was also a ballroom dance instructor in the nearest town, so the other instructors apparently made fun of her for being a pole dancer and a stripper so incessantly that she asked them to stop. They then doubled down on the taunts, and she eventually quit her job because of their pervasive harassment. As he finished telling this story, I remember reaching for my range bag and picking it up, ready to just walk out. But before standing up, I remembered that at this point, they were paying for all our ammo, and the very inexpensive class fee was non-refundable. So I decided I'd just stick around and use up some free ammo, get some free range time in, and then leave when I was done. Sure enough, I made it through all the cuts up to the end of the class, and then did not join the other guys as new instructors. Told them I wouldn't sign their non-compete, either, and have since trained hundreds of new shooters on my own. So there, harassers. Thanks for all the free .45 and virtually free instructor certificate. I was invited to a kickback by this guy I went to high school with. We were only acquaintances, so I thought it was a little random, but I figured why not? So I get to this party and it's just him and another guy. No one else. I was like, oh, am I early or something? And they just laughed and said no, this is the party. At this point I'm just sort of processing, laughing it off as they start talking, and suddenly the friend slaps me on the ass. I couldn't even say anything. I just completely turned around, walked out, and drove home. This was 12 years ago and I still think about it from time to time. The guy who invited me ended up marrying another mutual acquaintance in that time, with them divorcing almost immediately because he slept with one of her best friends. If you're out there, Paul, you're a fucking creep. I did some military training in Central Florida back in 2009. One day we trained on land navigation, which consisted of a 6-mile trek through the woods using a map and compass to locate specific landmarks. Through the 6 miles I got to become very familiar with what I believe were golden silk orb weaver spiders. They're huge black and yellow ugly sons of bitches that make seriously large webs. At one point I went through a web with one in it and it crawled across my head. Face. Finally finished the course and was relieved until they told us we would be coming back at 1 a.m. to do the course at night with night vision goggles. Once there that night, I put the goggles on and looked into the woods where I saw glowing dots all over the woods. That was the point where I said fuck this. Ended up finding a sidewalk that went around the edge of the entire course. Took this the entire way and never had to rumble with night spiders. Worked for a concrete company during the summer while I was in college. First summer wasn't too bad, second summer got worse. The boss man had cheated on his wife, and decided to hit the bottle as a way of coping with his continued infidelity. I made it through the second summer without much issue. Third summer, he starts purposely forgetting things so he can run back to the shop and stop by to grab a case. Comes back to the job site steaming mad all the time, yelling, screaming, threatening everyone. After 2 months of this, I had enough. Told him if he wanted it done, he could stay here and out of the case in the truck. Walked 3 miles to the nearest town and called my parents to get a ride back home. Fuck that guy. I spent 3 years on my high school sailing team. The first 2 years were actually kinda enjoyable cause I made friends with the upperclassmen. But after they left things went downhill. I was never invited to the regattas and my coach didn't give a shit about anyone not on the varsity crew. I'd just end up spending the majority of my time sitting in the boats wishing I was anywhere else. Then came the time when I decided to leave with my middle finger raised up high. It was one of the rare regattas I actually got to attend, but only because we were the ones hosting it. Well, the weather took a really bad turn, but coach still made us go out. This kind of weather was way too dangerous for our kinds of boats, so it was inevitable that many of us would capsize and have trouble including me. The coach got a lot of shit from the competing coaches and our parents about how irresponsible and dangerous it was for him to make us go out there, and in return he pushed it all onto us. The next day I had to cancel my participation in the races because a group project had fallen through. So I had to spend the day saving the project and my grade. It was a big enough project that if I failed, the school wouldn't have allowed me to attend regattas anyways. Well, during the next practice, my coach starts berating me about how I abandoned the team and ruined our chances of winning. He had no right to berate me for focusing on my grades and sacrificing the minor involvement I had with the race, especially since both myself and my teacher emailed him about the situation. I just left right then and there. I was honestly so much happier after leaving.